Hi, Rico here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about my Bay Rum bottle collection. To give you a little bit of backstory on the history of Bay Rum, and these are a few Bay Rum leaves that are iconic on the island of St. John. Um, Bay rum is something that goes all the way back to the 1600s, where different sailors would be out to sea for weeks, if not months on end, and they wouldn't have opportunities to take baths or showers very often. Matter of fact, water was a highly precious commodity on ships, and you weren't going to waste it on taking a bath. So what people would do is they learned from locals and stuff that if you took some of the leaves onto the ship, during the ship, during your voyage, you could rub the leaves on your body and it would give a nice smell. So you wouldn't smell like you've been on ocean for months on end. Then after a while, people learned, hey, instead of taking the leaves, we can crush them, take the oil, and take the oil instead, and then just apply it as needed. Matter of fact, the whole concept of avoiding stench goes way back to even Victorian times when you see people in England getting married and they're holding a bouquet of flowers. Well, they did that because things around them smelled so bad that the women would hold flowers in front of their face so they wouldn't have to deal with the horrible smells. Matter of fact, even the wealthy people, you notice the mansions all had huge gardens with all these flowers in there. That was because the surrounding city oftentimes smelled so bad that even when they had a party at their house and say they had 200 guests, because there was no running plumbing as we know today, people had outhouses. So to keep it from being a horrible stench, they had all these flowers. So bay rum was a thing that when it was developed, it became very powerful and very sellable. So let's go back to the three main people that had the strongest impact on the industry. This is Alfred Heinrich Rees. Most of us know him as A.H. Rees, and I like to call him the medicine man. This is Henry Michelson, and we'll refer to him as the salesman. Last man is David Bourne. We'll call him the island man. Now, Alfred Heinrich Rees, back in 1838, he didn't invent bay rum, but what he did as a scientist and as a pharmacist, he perfected the distilling of it. He perfected the rums that you would use. He detected or he invented the process to keep everything uniform. So if you buy a bottle of bay rum from me today and you buy one a month from now, the quality would be the same. Now, because he was also an apothecary, it gave him a certain amount of prestige. So it was just a matter of time before he started winning all these awards. Those are little gold medals that you can see on there. And he did quite well, becoming one of the richest men in all of the Caribbean. Now, when he became old, he sold out the business to the Pywanski family, and they turned it into the St. Thomas Bay Rum Company, or originally here, the Charlotte Amalie Bay Rum Company. And you can see the transition through time where originally was cork top bottles. You can even see a little bit of cork sticking out of the top, which lets you know that it's the turn of the century. But then the next transition that takes place is you start seeing the verbiage that says for external use only. And the reason for that is because of the 18th Amendment, or what we know as prohibition. So in 1920, the United States decided that consuming alcohol was a bad thing, and they didn't want you doing that anymore. So they passed laws against it, which in turn kind of crushed the industry. Now, the Bay Rum industry was the only time in Virgin Islands history when all three islands worked together to produce one product. St. John produced the Baileys, St. Croix produced the rum, and the Virgin Islands did the distilling and the marketing. So now we'll move along here. The next important person was Bourne, David Bourne, and his family, Gustav Bourne. They were from the island of St. John. They were known locally as the one that produced the best quality. And I guess because him being local and he was the one actually growing the product that was eventually being sold, he knew what the locals liked, so he was the best at perfecting it. And you can see these old bottles here from the 1800s with the little cork top. Some still have cork in them. Now, what's interesting about this one bottle here is that it says Barbados. And the reason it does, and it's also a screw top, when Prohibition went into effect and the islands became American in 1917, Mr. Bourne decided, I'm not going to get caught off guard, get put out of business, so I'm going to move my manufacturing to an island that does not have Prohibition. Moving on over now to the Mickelson family, originally from the Virgin Islands as well. But eventually, Henry Mickelson, his son in particular, moved to New York and became a prominent businessman. And he basically felt like, why are we sticking with these little bottles, this little bit of sales, when we can take this thing nationally? And he did just that. In New York, he had access to a whole bunch of marketing and access to different consumer markets all over the world, Australia, Germany, South America. So he took things from little consumption to marketing everything. So all the medals that they won, all the branding that they could would put on there with the marketing, and tiny writings right there. He actually got permission to be the sole distributor of Bay Rum for the North American continent. Didn't say it was the best product. Matter of fact, he got in a lot of trouble and went out of business because what he learned was, I have these bottles, I have this label, I have this marketing. I'll just put whatever in the bottles and keep slapping a label on there and I'll get paid. Well, that worked for a while till it didn't work. And he remained of the mindset, why let facts get in the way of a good story? And eventually led to his demise. Now, Bay Rum was a profitable endeavor for a number of people on the island. So say for example, the Hassel family, who the Hassel Island is named for, they also produced Bay Rum. And even Mr. Cecil Van Beverhout out of St. John produced his bottle of Bay Rum in the 1960s. So throughout history, like I say, it's the one time that the Virgin Islands came together and all pitched in for one product. They were so successful at that, is that St. Thomas Bay Rum, which is basically Virgin Islands Bay Rum, was the highest quality Bay Rum in the world. And even an empty bottle could demand a high value. So what we have here is us at our very best. For a period of time, the 1880s to about 1940, when no one in the world could touch us. But it was also during a period of time before tourism existed and when sugar had already collapsed. So it filled that gap for us and gave us something that we could be proud of and be our own. So with that being said, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed my presentation.